So somehow I just pushed myself out, got some kind of crappy job, got together to get these applications together to go off to graduate school, just filed them. And I went off to, I wanted to get out of the New York area, and got into all these places in the Midwest. When you're in New York, St. Louis, Cincinnati, they're all the same. It doesn't matter when you're a New Yorker. So I went Cincinnati, they gave me the best deal. They gave me a free ride, threw me a few bucks, and that's where I ended up. So I just packed up all my stuff in my '68 Chevy Impala and drove across the Appalachian Mountains, and I had every incentive, every attachment to say, now I'm coming from a bad scene that I wanted to get away with. This psychology stuff is going to be great. Cincinnati is going to be great. All these things are going to be positive, So, but then I go to graduate school, all right? And the way it works is all of these American Psychological Association approved, APA approved clinical psychology programs, they're pretty standard because they go around and they check them all out to make sure they have all the stuff, all the assessment and all the psychopathology courses and all the stuff you're supposed to learn. So they're pretty standard, and I remember the first year you take a lot of classes, then more and more you move into internships, and then you work on degrees and masters and dissertation, that sort of thing. But I remember early on, again having some questions, as they wanted us to be skilled at giving these assessment tools, IQ, for example, intelligence tests. And I remember them training us in this stuff, and it was the famous IQ test, the Stanford-Binet, the Wechsler scales, all these things. And I remember looking at these things, and I'm going like, most of these questions, most of these tasks have to do with your ability to kind of reproduce the reality. So saying digits backwards and forwards, or reproducing some codes, or giving them some, like Trivial Pursuit stuff, informational stuff of society. And I was going, there's big areas that are not in these intelligence tests that I consider intelligence that are not counted. And one, for example, was your ability to kind of see through BS. I mean, it's a big deal. Ernest Hemingway talked about, like, the most important tool of a writer is to have a shit-proof, detector. That was a big deal. So to be able to see through things, it's a huge, huge thing. And that wasn't on it at all. Another thing that I thought was really a big deal, I'd always thought the most intelligent people out there were people like, Richard Pryor and Lenny Bruce and Mark Twain, people who were funny, people with a wit, I thought that those people, that's a real sign of intelligence. Well, clearly there was nothing on these IQ tests that measured that. And there was nothing that measured kind of emotional ability to read people and to kind of understand and empathy. There was none of this stuff. And so it became clear to me that all of those kind of traits that really would more challenge society are not considered sort of intelligence. And the traits that a lot of these people who are academics, who they were good at, that's what they considered intelligence. So I started to question that, okay? But I didn't get myself into too much trouble yet. And then we took the psychopathology courses. There was child psychopathology, adult psychopathology, and it was a really interesting time, I should tell you. It was like 1978, 79. So they all knew, everybody knew the new DSM, at that time DSM-3 was coming out in they thought soon. It turned out in 1980. So here's the funny thing for me. It was like all these psychopathology professors, they didn't know what to do. What was going to be in the new DSM-3? We already knew that homosexuality was going to get kicked out because in the 1970s, gay activists had protested in San Francisco, scared the hell out of psychiatry in general, and they basically, we're not going to be called pathological anymore. You're not going to do it. And they got it out. So that was, but they didn't know what was going to be done with the rest of the DSM, or more things going to be taken out, more things added. It was confusing. And I remember sitting in a psychopathology class going like, and saying, I feel like we're in seminary school here. It feels like everybody's waiting for Exodus 2 to come out. And it's like, maybe Moses won't part the Red Sea anymore. Maybe he's going to dig a tunnel under it, or a bridge over it, something else. Well, I thought it was funny, but they didn't think it was that funny. No. And so, but then what happened was, while I was in 1980, I'm still in graduate school there, the DSM-3 does come out, and they took out homosexuality, God love them, but they put in a ton more. The book went from that to that, and then later on the DSM-4 is like that, it keeps on getting bigger. But they they added a lot of childhood pathology things. And so I went right to that and I started looking through them. I'm going, my God, you are pathologizing rebelliousness, stubbornness, resistance. I mean, some of these things were a little subtle, not so subtle, but like ADD, that's when that came in, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it was like, clearly we know that a lot of these kids from studies, pay attention to things they're actually interested in, or if you're getting paid, and they just don't pay attention to stuff that's boring that they have no incentive to. That's what a lot of these kids are. But that was a little more subtle, but the thing that was obvious was this thing called oppositional defiant disorder. I looked at it and I said, come on, this has got to be the joke copy. Somebody's pulling my money. You really didn't create a diagnosis called ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And for those, I know everybody, or most everybody here has heard about that, but for those of you who don't, the symptoms for this ODD are often argues with adults, often refuses to comply with adults, often angry with adults, often irritates adults, often is irritated by adults. All you need are 4 of these. There's about 3 more of them. I mean, there's like, and I started looking, I said, you gotta be kidding, guys. I mean, this is embarrassing. I'm already a little embarrassed by my profession. Now I'm really embarrassed. And so I started to, I started to think to myself, didn't everybody growing up at times in their life be ODD or oppositional defiant disorder? Weren't you oppositional defiant disorder at least sometime? And then I thought to myself, no, most of you weren't. People who rebel seem pathological to you. Makes perfect sense. In fact, maybe more than that, they might get you anxious because, whatever, there's a whole bunch of stuff to think about there. But anyway, so I started to ask more and more questions, not so much about being a kind of activist. I've sort of never really viewed myself as an activist. I still don't, really. I just view myself as somebody who just sort of either gets embarrassed or pissed off and ends up talking about it, And then what ended up happening was when I would do more of this stuff, evidently word would get around the faculty that I was doing some of this stuff. And one day I remember the head honcho, this clinical director guy, stops me and he says, this guy, I remember he's really full of himself. I don't know how I could describe this guy, sort of like a Donald Trump, Newt Gingrich, Geraldo Rivera kind of guy. I don't know. Sorry, was that too soon after breakfast? But that's the way But anyways, he stops me and he says, Levine, faculty are talking about you. I said, what? He said, you have issues with authority. It's obvious. You have authority issues. And I said, well, I thought to myself, well, at least I don't think that's in the DSM, so they're not going to trouble me. But I knew that wasn't good in terms of making career connections. So he keeps on pushing it. And I realize I'm smart to realize, you're telling me I have authority issues. If I say anything now, that proves your point, right? One of those kind of games. So I didn't. But he finally baited me and baited me and baited me. And finally I said, I do not have authority issues. I just have issues with authorities who don't know what they're talking about. Again, and not a good thing for career advancement. Right? Because not only do they have issues with a lot of people have a hard time with non-compliance. You bet I'm non-compliant. This is a great T-shirt here.
And inappropriate.
Not only do they have issues with that, but they also have issues with anger, okay? They have a hard time dealing with any kind of anger, and I was a little pissed off. So anyways, when I graduate school, and I don't know how, actually I did it in a lot of ways. It was a lot of luck because my friends, the couple of friends I had through in each kind of class who were most sort of anti-authoritarian, most willing to question authority, a lot of them never made it through. They just left in disgust, they quit, some of them got kicked out. The best therapists I knew when I was in graduate school, the most empathic, most respectful, they somehow couldn't deal with the politics either. But somehow, I don't know, I slithered through, I think by luck. And I get out, and what I say to myself is, I obviously, with my authority issues, haven't made all these connections to work in a university or work in institutional settings. But there's private practice, so I'm off to private practice.